All right. Hey, everyone. I'm Brandon from Wyoming. A lot of you already know me, and I've been around the EMS scene since about 2013, and I hope the pandemic is treating you all well. So just a brief little background on me and where I come from. I grew up in Arkansas and Georgia, so you'll hear that in my voice. You can take the boy out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the boy. So if you ever have a hard time understanding my redneck lingo, please just ask. I'm a pretty good translator as well. So I went to EMT school in 1998. I graduated from high school in 1999 to kind of give you a timeline on what I've done with my life. I did a brief little stint in law enforcement after that before realizing that that's an awful job. So I became a career firefighter and did a full career in Georgia before coming here in 2013 to Wyoming, where I wear several hats. So obviously I'm the EMSC dude, but also I am the office supervisor. So I'm responsible for the people who do the licensing and our compliance and education and all those different divisions of a state office of EMS. One of our divisions, which I do not supervise, is the trauma program, which will come into play here in a little bit. But as far as recognition goes, my position is a little bit different than a lot of you out there, because I've got the ability to write rules, to lean on enforcement of rules, and interpret quite a bit of those to my favor as well. So that's that. So yeah, I've been in Wyoming since 2013. And when I first came on, those of you that were here in 2013, remember that this had been discussed back then. My answer, and again, any of you who ever heard me speak on the subject, was this will never happen in Wyoming. This isn't a thing we're going to do. This isn't a thing I'm going to put any effort in because it'll never work here. Well, you know what happens when you say never. Here we are. So I'll tell you a little bit about how we got to where we got with our first recognition and how the program came to be. So if we can go to the next slide there. Yeah, so we'll skip. We'll go back one. Yeah, so we'll skip all of the whining and such that I did leading up to implementing this program because there was quite a lot of it. But the main reasons why we never considered it before 2018 is because there was no motivation, there was no incentive, there's no real reason in Wyoming to do this. All of our sick kids leave the state. Our super sick or super injured kids do not remain in Wyoming. We don't have any facilities for that. They go out of state, they go to Denver, they go to Utah, places like that. So there wasn't really any good reason. I mean, how do you walk into the hospital and ask a CEO, hey, I really want you to be recognized and meet all these objectives in the NPRP? And their response is, yeah, we keep a kid for like 5 minutes and then we send them out. Why do I need this stuff? So I honestly, I kind of just gave up on it. But aside from my own lack of effort, if you could randomly pick a barrier or an obstacle, whether it's real or whether we thought it was real, we had it in Wyoming. So we had every reason not to do it. But then, as you all know, the new performance measures came out and the Fed said, well, this is something I really want you to focus on. So we decided to give it another look, at least to some degree. We didn't know what that was going to look like for us, but we also knew we had never tried. So that's the point of my picture here on this slide is you've all heard this adage before, how do you eat an elephant? Well, one bite at a time. So when I started, I didn't even know what the elephant looked like for Wyoming. I mean, I knew what the performance measures said we were supposed to do, but on the flip side of that, what does recognition mean? What is a recognized hospital? What should that be? What does that look like in Wyoming as compared to New York? So many questions. And so I started by just talking to providers, talking to the EMS agencies out there, talking to my peers in other states. Spent a lot of time talking with T and Jocelyn about, you know, I can't imagine what this looks like. And they gave me some freedom and said, look, the past things that you've done in Wyoming have been extremely different than any other state has done it, but you've nailed it when you've done it. So be free and know that what it looks like for Wyoming is what it looks like for Wyoming, and we're not going to judge what that is. So immediately what popped in my head was, well, I'm a regulator. I could just say that all of these hospitals have to have this stuff in order to be hospitals, right? In order to have an ED. We'll just do the equipment thing. That'll be an easy, low-hanging fruit, and then I'll call them recognized. So I bounced that by my trauma program manager, and she immediately gave me this look that she gives, and she said, do you want to make the world a better place, or do you want to check a box? And so I grunted and kind of was sad, and then I said, okay, well, how do we make the world a better place? So yeah, we can go to the next slide now. So I started asking questions and thinking about, all right, well, where did we start? So this picture of me carrying this elephant on my back felt very, very real. My plan was to take a small little bite out of it, but what I ended up with was it just sat on me, and I couldn't figure out how to even turn around to take a bite of the thing. So I started thinking about science, and I started thinking about, what do I know makes kids, that was a horrible sentence. See, that country just came out. What do I know puts kids in a position to have better outcomes than they would have if I did nothing, right? The old adage about what happens to your room if you don't clean it. Will it get cleaner or will it get dirtier if you leave it alone and don't do anything? Well, the answer is it'll get dirtier, right? It is never going to clean itself unless you have a really good dog. But so our readiness scores were garbage, and that's just the truth. We scored better than one of the islands. I don't remember which one it was, but aside from that, we scored worse than everybody else in the country, and that made our hospitals really angry. They immediately went down the road of, well, all of this per capita measurement and yada yada yada, which brings me to a point. Might I point out that anytime anything about Wyoming or about healthcare comes out, Wyoming scores are always really bad, right? And it's because they're always, I mean, not that we're perfect here, but we get kind of shaded on that because of per capita measurement, right? But on the flip side, whenever they measure something that we do really good on, those measurements are never per capita. Like, for example, those of you that follow the Stop the Bleed campaign, the data that was just released out of Stop the Bleed is a count of how many total instructors exist in each state, right? Well, we spent 2 years producing Stop the Bleed instructors, and per capita, our numbers are outstanding. But guess what? They didn't measure it per capita. So it's a battle. Alaska, you know what I'm saying. I saw you on here. All right, so our pediatric readiness scores were garbage. Anybody who remembers the scores that came out, there will be no disagreement there. We got 3 hospitals that have decent capabilities for pediatrics. Now that is scaled on Wyoming. Our 3 biggest hospitals would be equivalent to most mid-tiers in major states, but for us, they're our big players. And they have, yeah, see, I saw that, Renee. So they have quite a bit of capability to take care of pediatric patients, but the catchment for them is not natural. So, and I'll get into that in just a minute here about what I mean when I say that. But actually, I'll just get into it now. So if you're sensitive, this might be a little bit hard to hear, but this is the truth out of Wyoming. A seriously sick or injured kid in Wyoming really only has about 3 paths they're going to be taken. They'll be stabilized and transported from the scene to a major PEDS facility out of state if it's within immediate range. So we're talking a helicopter, right? That's path 1 that they take. Path 2 is they're going to expire on the scene or be transported emergent to the closest hospital. So these are our low sick patients that we find on scenes. And for 60%, give or take, of our kids in Wyoming, that's a critical access hospital. That's not one of the big the bigger hospitals that we have in our state. And they're either going to be stabilized and flown out of state, or they're going to have a negative outcome. Or third is they go directly to one of the medium capability facilities by air, stabilized there, and then transferred out of state. Right? That's the way that it goes in Wyoming. So it is what it is. I can't necessarily change that paradigm. I'm not going to live long enough, I don't think, to see a Denver Children's in Wyoming. It's not going to happen. But I want a Denver Children's in Wyoming. So that's why I designed this program the way that I did. And we'll get into that a little bit more here in a second. But what all of this told me is that the facilities that are really going to benefit from recognition, the whole change the world paradigm, are the little ones, right? The middle ones, the highest tier in Wyoming, have no desire to spend money or to change their behavior, because regardless of what they do there, it doesn't change their behavior, right? And it doesn't change how they treat the kids. The high tier hospitals out of state, they're getting Wyoming's patients anyway. They're already bona fide children's hospitals. They would have no benefit necessarily to join Wyoming's program or to be recognized in Wyoming. And they're not in Wyoming, right? So technically it doesn't count. So the only ones left that could see a benefit are our little folks, right? Our little critical access hospitals. By the way, we have 25 facilities in Wyoming that have EDs. 16 out of those 25 are critical access hospitals. One of those, our smallest one, has 12 beds. Its ER can take 3 people, and there's the old school sheet separation between the ED beds. All right. And also, when you think of Wyoming, you think about our bigger towns, right? The ones around the mountains. So you've heard of Cody, you've heard of Jackson. Both of those are critical access hospitals. To give you an idea of what I'm talking about when I say most of our kids come to critical access hospitals. All right, so we can go to the next slide here. Oh, I'm sorry, you switched, I didn't. Okay, so that was kind of the mindset. All right, well, let's focus our program on the folks that are going to receive the sickest kids more often, and let's see what we can do to increase the potential outcomes that these kiddos are gonna see, and stand up our critical access hospitals to be able to do better stabilization, have access to better training. And then my cross my fingers effort is that when the little hospitals, if I can make it easy, right? If I can make it low-hanging fruit for them, and the bigger hospitals in Wyoming start seeing these little hospitals getting recognized for something, those of you that have worked in a hospital system know exactly what those middle-level hospitals are going to do, right? I won't have to drag them kicking and screaming along with me. They're going to join because they don't want their neighbor down the road in the newspaper where they're not. That's my plan, and I learned that for working in the regulatory world. It's a lot easier to dangle carrots than it is to swing sticks. So that's not true. It's a lot easier to swing sticks, but it doesn't get the same results. So what I did is I took the best science that I had access to on how to make a hospital more successful as it relates to peds, and that's the NPRP. I couldn't find anything better, anything more peer-reviewed, and anything more standardized than that. So that's what I started with. I didn't reinvent the wheel. I will give you, anybody who wants it can have a copy of the recognition program that we have. It's a 3-tiered system. In all honesty, Tier 2 and Tier 3 has not been written yet. It is not on paper. It does not exist. All that's written is Tier 1, and I'll explain why that is. Well, it's there on the screen, right? Tier 1 has to be obtained by the facility. So Denver Children's, which I know for sure is going to meet Tier 1, doesn't matter. They have to get credentialed at Tier 1 before they can consider moving to Tier 2 and Tier 3. And I'll explain my rationale. So my picture here is one of my heroes, one of my mentors, if you will, even though I've never met the man. The good thing about science is that it's true whether or not you believe in it. So by picking the NPRP as the basis for my plan and writing the requirements of the NPRP into my recognition program, what I did is I made my document a scientific document by proxy. So when I go to talk to physicians and I say, look, here's what we're trying to do, I can quickly tell them, look, this isn't Brandon, a paramedic, trying to tell you how you should be doing business in your hospital. This is this science here. And I just made it into Wyoming capable, into a Wyoming capable program, something that uses our language and makes sense to us. But every single point in here is referenced to a sentence in the science that's come out on the NPRP. Plus, there's a couple of other sources too. But anyway, so that was the logic. Brandon, don't invent stuff. Take the science that exists, turn it into something that's actually obtainable, and get it out there and see what happens. So tier 1, when a hospital achieves that, the way that I wrote the system, from that moment on, they will score a 90% or better on the NPRP assessment. So remember, my only carrot that I had was that the hospitals were upset about their scores, right? The only carrot I had was that, well, let's improve them. Well, now, if you hit tier 1 recognition, you're going to get at least a 90 on the NPRP. Back at that time, if I'd been able to magically overnight get all of our hospitals recognized under this program, if I had done that, we would have had the highest NPRP scores in the country at that point. So that was the goal, and that was my main talking point, is if we do this, this will happen. So the middle tier hospitals, our bigger hospitals, they're going to easily be able to reach the second tier. But again, none of them are recognized under the first tier yet, so it doesn't count. But the second tier basically adds NICU components and that sort of thing, again, coming out of the NPRP. That's why they're not getting 100%. But it adds those components to it so that there is truly a system of care then designed in Wyoming. You've got your frontline hospitals, you've got a mid-level that's got greater capabilities, that has greater ability to handle them in-house. And then third tier, there's not a Wyoming facility that will qualify for that. And again, in my career, I can't see it ever happening. That's Denver Children's, that's Primary Utah, that's ERMAC in Idaho. Billings Clinic, maybe. I know they would be a tier 2, but I'm not sure whether they would have everything for tier 3 or not. But anyway, that's the logic. All right, so we can go to the next slide here. So my system was perfect, right? I'm like, man, this is great. I'm going to be able to do this. All the hospitals are they probably already have this stuff anyway. Let's just do it. So I launched this thing. I emailed it out to the trauma listserv. I emailed it to every CEO, and I got exactly 0 responses. And for a minute, I was thinking about quitting. I was like, okay, yeah, I was right. This can't be done in Wyoming. Nobody cares, yada, yada, yada. So again, I went back to my trauma program, and Kelly helped me get the message to the folks that needed to get it. So that, in other words, they're the ones who really do the work in the hospitals, dealing with the things the state requires on the trauma side and that sort of deal. So she got the information out to there, but I still didn't get a whole lot of feedback. And I needed one. That's what the little hitchhiker emblem is. I felt like I was standing in the middle of the road saying, hey, let's go somewhere, holding my finger out, and people just kept driving right by and not paying me any attention. So as I do, I went back to thinking about carrots. What do I have at my disposal that I can use to try to encourage these facilities to go? And then I remembered that I'm a grant manager. And I remembered that what comes along with that grant is money. So I said, maybe these facilities don't have all the equipment, or maybe they don't have all the training. Let's offer money to get those things done, as long as it goes along with what the recognition program calls for, and they agree to be part of the recognition program. I can help them get some stuff done. So that's what I did. We can go to the next slide. So I offered up to the trauma listserv to personally, in other words, I told them, I said, I will dedicate as much time as you want me with you to help you figure out your policies, help you figure out your training programs. I'll help you stand up your own internal training programs for ACLS, PALS, EMPC. We can write a class if you want. I'm the state. I can credential a class. Whatever. I'm with you. Tell me what you need. And then I got a phone call from Tammy Brown. She is the say that again. Oh, she's the chief nurse for one of our critical access hospitals in Torrington, Wyoming. She reached out and she said, hey, my hospital, we wanted to participate, but we didn't write back or say anything because we don't have access to ACLS and PALS courses for our locums physicians. And I said, locums physicians, huh? And she goes, well, yeah. She said that most of the time we have one physician who works for us. Again, Brandon came into this with an Atlanta mentality. I forgot that many hospitals have one or two FTE doctor employees, unless they're specialists, and the rest of their time they staff them with either allied medical pros or locums. I didn't even think about locums as I designed this thing. So Torrington said they didn't call me because, well, our locums physicians don't necessarily have valid PALS or valid pediatric credentials, and we don't have the ability. We would train them, but we don't have anybody here who can train them. And it blew my mind. And I said, what is that the problem? So I reached out to a couple of other critical access hospitals at that time, and they said, oh yeah, that's the same as us. We use a lot of locums, so that's why we didn't bother replying, because you're not gonna help the locums folks get credentialed. And I said, oh, you don't know how desperate I am to do this. So Torrington and I entered into a pilot program. So we decided, I'm going to stop this recognition process. And I'm just going to work with this one hospital who may be representative of some of the roadblocks that are out there for other hospitals like them. Tammy immediately brought in Dr. Randolph, who is an outstanding human. Forget her medical credentials. She is just a great human being. She jumped on this and she said, yeah, here's what we need to do. I've read your thing and I want to do it. Here's what we need. And really what they were missing was training. So I put the money up and we got in-house PALS instructors trained at that hospital, 2 of them. We trained 3 ACLS instructors. We trained 2 EMPC instructors out of their nursing staff. Dr. Randolph suggested that, hey, if we can teach EMPC in-house, what's wrong with the doctor being credentialed in EMPC? She said that she had attended an EMPC course. If you don't know, emergency nurse, pediatric, I don't remember the C part. It's pediatric certification for nurses. She went through that class because one of her nurses said, hey, you need to come take this, and I think you'd enjoy it. She did, and she said she learned a lot in that class. Yes, thank you. And she said, why couldn't we teach our locums doctors EMPC? Because that's easy, it's low-hanging fruit. Would you allow that as pediatric education for our physicians? And I said, as long as they're ACLS certified and as long as they're EMPC certified after that, I don't see what's wrong with it. Let me check with the ENA. So I called our local ENA person and she said, why would a doctor want to take EMPC? I said, that's not the question. I said, that's not the question. What do you think? Do you think it would be beneficial, and do you think it could be equivalent to something like APLS or PALS even? And she goes, well, yeah, if they have ACLS and they take EMPC, they would have every piece that they need to be equivalent plus 10 times more to hold a PALS class. To hold a PALS credential. So I agreed. I modified the program and we allowed physicians to take EMPC. Now, much to the chagrin of the locums doctors who ended up getting stuck in an EMPC class, they were not happy. But those that I talked to after they did it, they actually got a lot out of that course. So my moral to that story is, if you haven't done this yet, or if you're having roadblocks, ask the people. Yeah, Sally, they absolutely did learn a lot, and most of them wouldn't admit it. But Dr. Randolph, again, being the human that she is, she said, yeah, we don't cover some of this stuff in med school, like the down in the dirt on how you do a thing. We don't cover that. It was really good. So use this as a lesson. If you don't take anything else out of this little talk, be willing to bend. Be willing to take, because I thought I wrote a really good program, and the NPRP doesn't say anything about a physician having EMPC counting towards their pediatric credentials, but I think they should, because my question to the NPRP at that point, if they said, no, it has to be PALS or it has to be APLS or something like that, my question to them would then be, okay, so you're saying it's better to require a course that may not be accessible and allow physicians who still have the right to practice in facilities when they have no specific training, just like that last poster just said. I didn't see who sent it. But med school doesn't cover a lot of ped stuff. I mean, there's a little bit of residency. There's a little bit of certainly L&D and neonatal care, and a little bit of the whole spectrum of medical care. But I know for sure that paramedic school doesn't really get deep into peds. And from all the doctors I've talked to, they all agree that, med school doesn't really get deep into peds. So they kind of talk like they're little adults. They're not. So my argument to accepting that for anybody who challenged that would be, if you're willing to say that no specific pediatric education is equivalent to just having an MD, then fine, you say whatever you want. But I say any sort of specific pediatric training that a doctor gets, regardless of whether it's an EMT level class, a paramedic class, a nurse class, or a pediatric intensivist class, all of that makes that doctor better for taking care of peds. Prove me wrong, scientists. So that's that. But it worked for us, and it worked for Torrington. And Torrington wrote a policy that says any locums physician who works here either has to have one of these courses with valid credentials, or they have to agree that within 30 days of beginning work at Torrington, most of their contracts go for like 3 months or something like that, that they agree to attend one of these courses that are going to be offered in-house. And that's how we cracked that nut. That was, aside from a minor equipment issue, that was the only thing holding them back. And they didn't tell me, because of the way I'd written it. I'd written it black and white. It looked very much like rule language. They didn't intrinsically think that there was wiggle room in there. And so by working directly with a pilot hospital rolling this thing out, we were able to make the program obtainable by everybody, because I had one hospital I was dealing with, and we had a relationship where they could tell me to go pound sand, and my job was to figure out a way around it. And it worked really, really good. We can go to the next slide. So, yeah, a lot of this slide is about, well, yeah, that's fine. We'll just go to that one. You're good. Stay where you're at. So, nope, you're good. Yeah, because I said most of what was on that slide previously. I got ahead of myself. So we're good right here. So this picture doesn't do it justice. But the other big carrot that seems so dumb, I mean, it really does seem so dumb. But Torrington right out of the gate said, look, when we get recognized, we want two things from you. We want the newspaper out there, and we don't get a lot of good opportunity for PR here. We want to capitalize on, we want somebody from the state. We want to invite the governor's office out there. We want everybody to know what we did and how hard we worked on it. And Dr. Randolph pipes up and she goes, "And I want a really cool plaque to hang in our main entrance that looks different than any other plaque we have. And I want to hang it right there for every person who walks in that says, we took a minute to think about our kids. That's what I want." So I did it. I worked with a company out of Canada, not because I didn't try to buy American, but I couldn't find anybody who was really willing to help me design something. And I don't know if you've seen Wyoming State EMS patch, but it's awesome. And it was designed by a guy out of Ontario, Canada. He's a paramedic out there. So I reached out to him and I said, "Look, here's what I need. I need a plaque like no other plaque has ever been hung in a hospital. And I want it to look flashy, and I want it to look cool, and I want it to just stand out and be different." And he said, "Phew, boy, this is going to cost some money designing this thing. What are you going to do? Or, do you have the funds for that?" Well, then Wyoming Healthcare Preparedness, David Edwards, reaches out to me. He was renewing his grant, and he said, "Hey, I need two things from EMSC. One, we have to be partners together, and so we actually have to do some work on disaster preparedness and stuff like that as it relates to PEDS. But also, I want to tie some of our funding to things that EMSC needs." And I said, "What do you think about plaques?" And I explained to him what I was looking for. And so he said, "On one condition, if you add to your program that their disaster policies and their emergency preparedness policies have to have addendums and appropriate action plans for pediatrics." He said, "That's one of my performance measures." He said, "You put that requirement in there and I'll buy your plaque." Here we are. So this picture doesn't do it justice, but this plaque is completely clear. That little thing up at the top, that's actually super shiny silver metal, and it's actually metal inlaid in the acrylic, and it's brushed with like a circular grinder, and it creates these little circle patterns in there. And it's got my logo, healthcare preparedness logo, much to the chagrin of the Department of Health. It doesn't have their logo on it. But I told them, I don't have room for your logo, so sorry. So besides, mine's cooler anyway. So that was that. In the text, we kept it simple. I got a proof of this made, sent it to Bonnie, and she loved it. And she said, "Can you get me two? Because I want to hang one up in my house." And I said, "No, these are really expensive." So this thing is hanging up at the main entrance into their ED. They worked for 5 months on this, but we recognized them. This quote, go back one slide. So this quote come out, there we go. This quote come out of the newspaper. This was written by the CEO down in the bottom. And the CEO, sometimes the CEO is also the electrician, right? This is a tiny little hospital, but he was so proud of the work. And come to find out, I didn't find out until we were standing up for pictures. Tammy and Dr. Randolph, when this started with the CEO, both of them walked into the CEO's office and said, "Hey, we're going to do a thing and you're going to support us. And if we ask for money, you're going to give it to us." And he said, "Well, now hang on a minute." And they said, No, that wasn't a question. I was just telling you what I was doing." And then they left. They walked out of his office. And he did it. He did what they said. And he was extremely proud of them. We had community members. So there was probably 30 people that just live in Torrington standing in the parking lot out there. There was elected representatives standing up there, city council members, county commissioners, obviously the newspaper. And it was just a moment of pride. After that, we went into the cafeteria. Obviously, COVID didn't exist. We went into the cafeteria and we all had a big lunch that the hospital put on, and it was great. It was fish tacos, and it was outstanding. And their chefs cooked it all there. They got to be a part of the event. It was super cool. And I said, you know what? Every single hospital we recognize, we're going to do this right here. This was huge. And that newspaper article bounced around the state. It was great. All right, so we can go to the next slide. I'm rambling. So within moments, I had 5 more facilities lined up wanting this thing. Oh, sorry, I gotta go slides. This was December of 2019. We had 2 more regions of the state. We had put on in-house PALS instructor training, in-house ENPC training. We had stood up the training issues around the state because that was what everybody said we can't do. We can't do the training part. So we did that. We shared the policy that Torrington wrote about locums. Several small hospitals picked that up and said, oh yeah, we can do that. It was great. So December of 19, everything was cool. I had contractors. I'm a 0.5 FTE to EMSC. So that gives me a little bit more money to be liquid as far as what I do with the program. So for me, Wyoming is a huge, huge state. It's like one giant small town with really long roads between the houses, right? Everybody's connected to each other, but in order to get, our towns are, if you look at a map, it is literally as far as it takes to ride a horse in a day apart from each other. That's why they were designed that way. Every town is between 29, depending on the terrain, between 29 and 34 miles apart, back before there was railroads. So the distance between Cheyenne and the next closest major town, which is Casper, is 2.5 hours to get there. So for me, the best way I can use that extra payroll money that I would have if I was 100% FTE is I employ contractors. And those contractors go out and do work for me. I lost the presentation because I lost internet. I think it'll come back. Anyway, those contractors go out and do work for me. And so I had them out in the state talking to CEOs, talking to hospitals, moving this program forward. And that was all well and good until we were ready to recognize 3 more facilities. We'd actually already scheduled dates, 1 in February of 2020 and 2 in April of 2020. And then I don't really have to tell this group what happened in February or April of 2020. You can switch to the next slide with my next elephant on it there. I can't, just so y'all know, I can't see the presentation at the moment. My internet apparently died.
We still can. We're
that's
good.
another. All right, that's another joy of living in Wyoming. So, yeah, I don't have to tell you guys what happened to all of our beautifully laid plans. Our contractors suddenly couldn't visit facilities anymore. I couldn't. I wasn't even. Oh, hang on. All right, sorry about that. I fixed it. I wasn't even allowed to really leave the office and travel and do other stuff. And in a state like Wyoming, this doesn't work by phone. Like, I've got to go there. I've got to help them write their policies if they don't have that sort of thing. So, I mean, it just paused. It is what it is. I was really upset about it because I lost my 3 recognitions. I only have 25 hospitals. Having 4 total hospitals gets me real close to my metric, right? So it was sad, but those 5 facilities, I've touched base with them as recently as 2 weeks ago. They still want it. They, obviously their individual situation has changed a little bit, but they want it. They still intend to do it. They're still teaching classes. They're keeping their credentials up. As soon as the rest of the world is ready to move forward, I'm ready to. We're going to pick the ball up and we're going to run with it just like we were running with it back before everything turned into a dumpster fire, as you can see in this one. But we'll get there. We'll get it back. I think by 2022. At this point, I'm not really comfortable putting projections out there as to what the state of the world will be. But I think by 2022 we can have 25%. My goal was, and it was completely achievable, was to have 100% by 2022. But that just isn't going to happen now. So anyway, that's that. It is what it is. I could spend the rest of my life whining about, how horrible this was, but nobody cares. All I got to do is fix it. So last slide. This program's there. You really don't need it. What if you don't have something, this would be a good model to design it on, except that it's literally the NPRP. All right, all the requirements that they have to meet are the measurements of the NPRP for level 1. Because the way that I read NPRP is if you get 100% on the NPRP score, then you are ready to receive kids, right? So why would the goal be anything less than 100%? That doesn't make any sense. That's the NPRP says this is the minimum stuff you should have. So it's the NPRP. Again, it's missing a couple of elements from there. I couldn't hit 100% because this is still Wyoming. I can't hit 100%. It's just not going to happen. And I bet most of you have that problem too, whether you're New York or whatever. But anyway, if you want a copy of this bad boy, you can have it. What is nice about it is the first part is written like rule. It's written like rule for a very specific reason. Our trauma program rules require that a hospital is recognized by the trauma program as a trauma hospital in order to hold a license for their ED in Wyoming, right? That's step 1. Step 2 is once the trauma program has agreed that once we have 50% of the hospitals voluntarily in this program, they will put it in the trauma rules as a requirement to be a trauma facility. So when I hit 50%, this will become law in Wyoming. That's why I wrote the first part as rule. I went ahead and did the work for if I'm not there 5 years from now when that happens, somebody's got this and they can implement it in rule. So soon, I hope, this will be the law. Every hospital in Wyoming, if you have an ED, you will be recognized at level 1 by the state's EMSC program, period. That's one of the advantages I have of being a regulator and being an EMSC manager, is I can put what we want into law, or into the effective law, if you will. So that's that. So if you have a trauma program in your state, you have a trauma program in your state. If you have a relationship with your trauma manager, they will be your best friend in this, because when you write it so that trauma and medical are treated the same, because then you're checking off both performance measures at the same time. You with me? There shouldn't be different medical stuff than there is trauma stuff. It's the same thing, right? Because sometimes medical patients need blood, right? It's the same deal. You can write them, which is what I did here, so that the two things are equal and you check both boxes at the same time. Don't just recognize a trauma way and a medical way. You're spinning your wheels. Do both of them at the same time would be my recommendation to you. Make friends with your trauma manager. They have the magic to make some stuff happen because they tend to have a lot of teeth in their rules. And third, talk to the hospital and engage with them for real. Like be willing to bend, be willing to figure out alternatives. Be willing to invest some money into, don't teach PALS classes. Don't do it. Avoid that. That's easy, but that'll get you for 2 years. Invest your money in standing up programs so that they can teach their own PALS classes. You with me? So that's the guidance that I would have for you and the stuff that I learned. And yeah, all right. So any questions for me? Thoughts, concerns?
So Brandon, I'm going to start with a couple of the comments and questions in the chat box, if that's okay. I think this is a question for everybody, maybe that will promote some discussion. Oregon has a question. How have other states addressed the issue of reverse numbering for PEDS recognition and trauma hospital recognitions? For example, tier 1 being a low recognition for PEDS ready, but level 1 is at the highest level for trauma. Anybody have any comments or any suggestions for our colleagues in Oregon?
So I have one real quick. This is Brandon. My slideshow here says tier 1, but that is not what I call them. Their names match what the trauma program calls our levels. So that's how I dealt with that. I use tier 1 to paint the picture of this is low, this is high. I don't use that language, and I don't talk about level 1s or anything like that for the reason that you just pointed out. Oregon this is a mess and confusing, and Wyoming is different than our neighbors around us. It's a nightmare. So I married what our trauma program calls trauma hospital levels to hours.
Yep, it looks like a couple other folks are commenting, stay away from numbers and use names. Morgan in Kentucky, we just avoided the numbering and we used PEDS Ready Emergency Department. So yeah, absolutely along those same lines. A reminder to not forget that the new toolkit, Sally wants to remind us that the new toolkit ED checklist are on the EIC website. Several folks, Brandon, have wanted to look at your recognition manual. I can, since you sent that to me, I'd be happy to share it out, or would you like me to direct folks to your email? How would you prefer to go about that?
No, that's fine. You can send it out to everybody on the call. It was made by federal dollars. It belongs to you as much as it belongs to me.
That's awesome. What other questions, or maybe taking this time to open discussion? I'd welcome feedback for what you all would like to see in the next community of practice. Any suggestions from the EIC, or if any of you have thoughts or ideas about what would be good information to have moving forward to help you, you know, continue your journey in ongoing success. Please share with me so I have an idea. All right. Hearing none. Brandon, thank you so much for presenting your work today. It looks like lots of folks got several ideas. I think that you're doing terrific work in Wyoming, and we appreciate it.
Brandon, this is Kate Remick. I just wanted to say that's really incredible, and I think so insightful the way that you were able to utilize nursing programs and resources that exist with Wyoming to make this happen. So kudos to you and the team, and best of luck as you continue to expand this program. I know so many people learn from you, so thanks so much for taking the time today to share your story with everyone. Congratulations.
Yeah, and also we did do APLS here. I sent a physician to APLS instructor school, which cost me about $11,000, might I add. Hotels in Sacramento are stupid, crazy expensive. But I sent one, and we put on 3 APLS classes through or from the AAP out in Wyoming, and not a lot of states have APLS instructors, so I was glad I was able to do that too.
Perfect.
Fantastic.
All right, and for everybody else, Brandon has shared he's graciously shared his email and cell phone number in the chat for those of you who are asking. So, and I will send out the document so we can capture the whole group, his recognition manual as well. A reminder that this presentation will be saved to our EIC website. And if there are no further comments or questions, I will give you all 30 minutes back in your schedule today. Thank you again for participating, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.